I want to try to answer Bryce's question about hardening. And I am not a metallurgist. I only know enough to be dangerous. And I'm going to try to share what I know and discuss it reasonably, I guess. Bryce asked about if the aggressiveness of the 5080 grit stone could damage the edge hardening, the Rockwell hardening, or I like to say hardening and tempering, that if that aggressive grit on the steel could somehow disrupt or ruin the hardening. My first intuition on that was that hardening is a heat treatment, and unless you're getting the steel really hot, and usually it takes something like a grinding belt or a sanding belt or electric disc, something that can produce that kind of motion and friction to get hot enough to disrupt the original hardening that was placed on the steel. And I guess that can happen. There's a fellow that was active in the Wicked Edge forum. Robert was his name, and he always pointed towards hardening damage to the edge. I never really got into that much. I looked at my edge damage as a physical disruption to the steel, and I was removing physically damaged steel and bringing up fresh steel that I could shape and polish to a keen edge to make a sharp knife. But that said, with the new steels, we're getting into molecular science with not only the electronics aspect, nucleuses and atoms revolving, but you're also getting into a molecular aspect and you're heat treating it. So I don't know the way these new high-tech steels are made, these crucible powdered steels and whatever, how they're made, if that hardening affects the molecular level of the steel, because there are carbide molecules and there are other molecules, and the way they fit and they interact, I don't know if the hardness affects it such that that aggressive grit can physically bust these molecules apart and thus damage the edge. As you're using the grits sharpening on your wicked edge, are you hitting it aggressively enough with a sharp enough, the 5080 are big diamonds and they dig deep. Are you physically getting in there, and has the molecular characteristic of that steel matrix changed because of the hardening to make that brittle because of using that aggressive stone? Now, I don't know if the steel is hardened as a solid slab, the whole knife, or if some heat treatment is just to the edge. I imagine there are some that are treated only on the edge, and maybe the spine or the heel of the knife is softer because it doesn't have that same brittleness because of the heat treatment's different. So all these different aspects may feed into what Bryce was suggesting, that the aggressiveness of the coarse grits could disrupt the heat treatment or fracture it, or however you want to word it. That I don't know for sure. I can tell you that we're going to discuss my experiences with the hardened steels, the more brittle steels, and how I sharpen them. We'll get into that later, but to try to answer Bryce's question, I don't think so. I think that to actually disrupt the heat treatment, you need heat. but I don't know where we're talking if on a molecular level, the way that the different particles that make up that steel matrix interact. I don't know if the coarseness of the grit is strong enough to physically break those molecules apart, and that may be a contribution, that brittleness, the way that breaks apart, that may be contributed to by the hardness or the hardening process. That I don't know. So I hope that I answered your question, Bryce. I would, to make it simple, I would say that using the coarse stones need to be used when they're appropriate. I don't think that the physical force that coarse stone exerts on the steel disrupts the hardness of the steel. It may physically damage the steel matrix, but I don't think that it actually damages the hardness. But I'd be love to hear from some of you guys who have some real metallurgic hobby interest and may be able to provide some more information on that area. Thanks. And Bryce, thanks for your input.